When you decide to watch a movie or TV show in a language you don't understand, you essentially have two options: subs or dubs. And neither option is ideal. Subtitles avert your gaze away from the action and could lead you to missing critical plot points. Meanwhile, watching dubbed movies is even worse. The poor translation and the distractingly bad lip sync just pulls you out of the action. As anyone who's seen an old kung fu movie or spaghetti western knows, the most distracting aspect of traditional dubbing is the really bad lip sync. And honestly, both of these issues are interconnected. I mean, think about it. Accurate translations that take into account sentence structure, cultural context, and slang is already a tall order. But trying to fit that translation into the actor's original mouth movements? Best of luck. So, is this a problem that AI could help solve? Pretty soon, you could watch your favorite K-drama stars speaking perfect English, and Tom Cruise could sound like he's fluent in any Korean dialect. But dubbing is just scratching the surface. How might this technology change the very art of filmmaking? What does it mean for the vast labor pool involved? And what kind of impact is this going to have on our viewing experience? I'm Bilawal Sidhu, and this is the TED AI Show, where we figure out how to live and thrive in a world where AI is changing everything. Hi, I'm Bilawal Sidhu, host of TED's newest podcast, the TED AI Show, where I talk with the world's leading experts, artists, journalists to help you live and thrive in a world where AI is changing everything. I'm stoked to be working with IBM, our official sponsor for this episode. In a recent report published by the IBM Institute of Business Value, among those surveyed, 1 in 3 companies pause an AI use case after the pilot phase. And we've all been there, right? You get hyped about the possibilities of AI, spin up a bunch of these pilot projects, and then crickets. Those pilots are trapped in silos, your resources are exhausted, and scaling feels daunting. What if, instead of hundreds of pilots, you had a holistic strategy that's built to scale? That's what IBM can help with. They have 65,000 consultants with generative AI expertise who can help you design, integrate, and optimize AI solutions. Learn more at ibm.com/consulting. Because using AI is cool, but scaling AI across your business, that's the next level.
Canva presents your work horoscope for this week. Deadlines are in retrograde, which we all know can bring some intense energy. Our advice: fend off this forecast with Canva. Like Canva whiteboards to counter creative blocks, and Canva docs for clarity in communications. If you have any sales deals coming through, results will be in your favor with Canva presentations, manifesting many wins for you. It's a great week to love your work at canva.com.
Teams with big ideas start in Jira, the only project management tool you need to plan and track work across any team. Jira even helps our team here at TED, keeping us in sync to deliver the big ideas our listeners love. And there's a lot more that teams will love about Jira. It keeps cross-functional tasks organized with a project's timeline. That's always really key so that we make our deadlines. And cross-functional teams like TED working in one tool gives leaders the important visibility they need to make better business decisions. Get started on your next big idea today in Jira.
Computer graphics have been changing the way it's possible to tell a story since the 1970s. At the SIGGRAPH conference in 1986, a new studio called Pixar unveiled one of the first 3D computer animated films, starring 2 lamps you most definitely recognize. Attendees of the 1993 SIGGRAPH were some of the first to see groundbreaking CGI of a little old movie about dinosaurs. Jump to 2018 at SIGGRAPH, when a paper called Deep Video Portraits used generative AI to show how we might be able to use computer graphics to manipulate human facial expressions. Tech that could make anyone say anything with extremely convincing mouth movements, popularly known as deepfakes. Hollywood filmmaker Scott Mann came across this paper at that conference, and he immediately began seeing the potential for how it could profoundly change how movies are made. Today, Scott is the founder of Flawless, a company that specializes in what he calls vubbing. And later this year, he will release the first fully AI dubbed or vubbed feature-length movie. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So let's go back to 2018. You cited coming across the Deep View Portraits paper at the SIGGRAPH conference as one of the main reasons you got into the AI field. Can you explain for the audience why it was so significant for you?
Yes, it was definitely a very kind of life-changing moment seeing that paper. I'll set some context maybe because
Sure.
I think where I was coming from this is I've been a filmmaker, a writer-director my whole life. Right? I've pursued that with passion, wanting to kind of express something, share experience, tell a story. I think I kind of, like many artists and actors, I think we're all striving for similar things. But for probably the decade of working professionally in the film industry, I'd really experienced the real kind of hurdles and problems of the industry in that it is so expensive and so difficult to make a film, right? It's hundreds of people. It costs a huge amount of money. You've got an army of people gathering together to make a film. I love the process. I love shooting. I love the work. But it's so expensive that you kind of get boxed out and originality kind of gets booted out. You know, you can't afford originality in the right way. So you end up with all these compromises to whether it's the film you're writing to make or the film that you're making itself. And then that was kind of further exacerbated by the other existential problem that I kind of recognized, which was when I saw one of my movies, it was a film called Heist. I had this incredible cast, including Robert DeNiro, and we'd literally crafted this from the core together, and so had crafted a character, dialogue, nuance. I had the kind of, the privilege of working with these great artists, and we really kind of crafted the film into something that we're very proud of. And then when I saw a foreign dub of the movie, I was devastated, really, because that was when I first saw that when a film in its traditional kind of dubbing process go out to wider audiences beyond a home language, the fix of that is the 100-year-old fix, which is rewrite the dialogue to try and fit the wrong mouth movements, perform it differently to try and get an idea of synchronicity. And it really kind of ruins the cherished baby that you've done in the first place. So you go to all this trouble, all this difficulty of trying to make a movie, and you're principally making it for one language. And both of those things kind of conflate together into this problem of you don't have enough audience reach, and the cost is and the time it takes to make a movie is so high that's why it was that was the problem that was kind of eating the industry as I entered it. But when I saw the SIGGRAPH paper, Deep Video Portrait, it kind of blew my mind because it meant that it fundamentally was going to transform what was possible in the filmmaking process. I think seeing human renderings at such a level that you were able to change things and edit things in a way that just wasn't possible previous to that moment. And for me, I think we'll probably look back at that particular paper, which is like a headline paper of SIGGRAPH. That was one of the first uses that people might say today as generative AI, right? The first times that there's been a rendering of something that looks so human. And it was it was a crazy moment seeing it and thinking, wow, that is going to completely change how I make films and how we might distribute films and the experience that you can then deliver to an audience.
I mean, it's interesting, like the visual effects world has been doing digital humans, and it usually involved, as you said, immaculately 3D scanning people and sort of using the classical computer graphics pipeline. I'm wondering, with these, and you're totally right, Deep Video Portraits was this like first instantiation of generative AI that looked so photorealistic, it like passed that visual Turing test. I'm curious, when you came across that, like, how quickly did your mind go to AI dubbing for film and video?
To be honest, straight away, because the dubbing solution, I tried to solve with these other traditional pipelines before. So I kind of recognized that problem back, I say, in 2014 when I did Heist. And I'd always thought there's got to be a better way of doing this. So typically how it works is a director like myself, right, we'll finish a film and we'll deliver it to whichever studio or owner who is representing it. And then from that point, it's handed off to localization houses around the world. Those are networks of studios around the world that typically house these experts who have expertise in adaptation. So they're multilingual expertise in adaptation of rewriting the script to try and fit it into the mouth movements whilst also capturing the cultural nuance and difference of expression, which is kind of impossible, to be fair. Like, so you can be the great, there are some very, very talented people in this field. It is so difficult. And And those constraints, though, kind of make an authentic translation impossible, really, by and large. And that's why you're kind of wrestling between the lack of immersion and the kind of strangeness of not having someone's expression in sync, which has another problem that I think maybe people are not fully aware of. When you experience a movie and when it's in sync, it's kind of the magic of movies was all came from this. Like, it comes alive when it's in sync, right? You kind of are pulled in and you're immersed into it. And when you watch a movie that's in sync where someone's expressing through their face, you're then pulled into a human connection where you're looking at their eyes, the mouth, you're reading them like we do as a human being, like me talking to you now. As soon as it detaches and it's out of sync, you don't get pulled into the same level of immersion. It's almost like a voiceover. You're looking at the film, you're watching it in a different way, and the experience is changed.
So what Scott just said about things not syncing up totally resonates with me. I mean, even if you're in like a Zoom or video chat conference call, right? When the audio slightly lags behind the video, I am totally distracted. But what about subtitles? We're pretty used to subtitles by now.
And then if you've obviously got subtitles, you're actually looking at the bottom of the frame. And when you make a movie, like when you edit a movie in the editorial process, I'll direct a movie and edit a movie, working out kind of where the audience's attention is adjacent to the frame. So I'll take a lot of care, for example, that if someone pulls a gun at this end of the frame when we've framed it up between myself, the cinematographer, the editors, and then the cut to might be an eyeball reaction. Now, if the eyeball reaction is down here in the frame in the bottom right instead of where the other thing, the audience don't have time to travel across, and the experience is different between the shots. And so as a filmmaker, you're kind of trying to orchestrate an attention kind of movement and a rhythm that is important to the experience, which subtitles, lack of immersion dubbing, it all just kind of knocks that out completely.
And meanwhile, like, it sounds like, creatives such as yourself have to choose between a rock and a hard place. It's either you have completely unsynced dialogue, which totally is jarring and throws off a viewer, or you're looking at subtitles, which means you're not able to guide the gaze of the viewer like you intended.
And that's why I did kind of road test a few pipelines myself on traditional VFX work. And again, it just wasn't going to scale. But more to the point, it wasn't, like you said, it didn't pass the test. It didn't pass the sniff test. It was just not going to work that way. So I think the click for me when I saw the SIGGRAPH paper, D-Video Portrait, was, oh my God, this is a way to solve that problem, right? That is going to solve that issue. And the possibilities that my mind went to, I just remember getting goosebumps and being so excited. And it was the first time in my industry where I'd felt hope again, where I felt actually, wow, this is going to enable us to make things that I've dreamt of making. And I ran after it like a crazy person because I thought this is how you can really make an impact. You know what I mean? Like, me doing one film is kind of one way, but actually enabling everyone with this stuff is a very exciting idea.
It sounds like you came across this amazing piece of research. You identified a pretty cool problem and then set out to fix it. So how did you go from seeing this tech at a computer graphics conference to unveiling your own technology and product company around it just a couple of years later?
Well, I think the first was really getting to understand it a bit better. The SIGGRAPH paper, D-Video Portrait, I was stunned when I saw it. I didn't understand it, and that kind of set me off on a journey to try and understand it, honestly. That was, I reached out to the authors of that paper, Young-Woo Kim, Pablo Garrido, and Professor Christian Theobald over at the Max Planck Institute. Definitely science and academia was not my area, but I reached out to those guys and said, oh my God, this is so exciting. I'm a filmmaker. I would love to find out more. And then it kind of led to founding the company with those very scientists who now, are still at the heart of Flawless today, leading the science group. Christian, Young-Woo, and Pablo all are kind of filmmakers at heart, weirdly. They have a passion for film. And when I spoke to them, that kind of came across when I met with them. And I started to understand, when I look back now, in a very rudimentary way, how these things were working and what was the blockers from their side. Because I kind of pitched them what I envisaged it might be a help with like a dubbing pipeline. They'd, like Pablo in particular, as a Chilean with a German mother, he'd experienced lots of different kind of language versions of films, and then that work was kind of handed over and to Young-Woo Kim, who brought in neural rendering aspect to it, and they kind of jointly brought this out together. So they'd kind of delved toward that end already to some degree, but they had clear problems. I remember Christian Theobald in particular was saying there was clear issues that they couldn't solve, that meant that the pipeline wasn't going to work for that purpose. And what was quite fascinating is the problems that they couldn't solve, to me, were really easy problems that I knew how to fix in a VFX pipeline. So in terms of occlusions and stabilizing videos and these kind of things that I was used to. So the journey that we went on was, why don't we propose a new type of pipeline?
It sounds like you're working with these talented computer vision researchers, and they're like, well, we can't do this in a fully automated fashion. You're like, hold up. I know how to do this.
Yeah,
there's this thing called the visual effects.
Yeah, that's true. It's like, I think, because you're coming from two different, you've got a cross domain going on, right? Where it's like the fundamentals of scientifically solving, foundational problems is different than maybe kind of some of the traditional processes in the VFX workflow. But I think a thing I've noticed, the scientists and the filmmakers share the common bond of that creative imagination, of creative problem solving, that both sides are so passionate for it. So even though you have two very different domains, there is a real intersection crossing down the center of that. And so I think, my suggestions kind of got them excited, and then that folded into the work. And it was, so we kind of worked through it together. I reached out to the folks I'd made Lionsgate, who I'd made Heist with. And I thought, let's test this properly. Let's test it on the problem that caused me to get into this in the first place. So I got footage from my film of Bob De Niro through Lionsgate and used that to test it at a level where it's in a film, it's doing these challenges. And that became the kind of test bed and the kind of inspiration of what ultimately was built out. But we had to go through that process and kind of really work a real world POC to kind of prove out it was working. And that was the very first thing that was ever, as we now call it, vubbed, but visually translated, was a clip of Robert De Niro doing a scene from Heist. So it was quite a cool one to do it on.
Now, on this journey from making movies to starting a software company, you had some help along the way. Tell us about your co-founder and co-CEO, because that is a very unconventional setup.
Nick Lyons, who is the co-founder, co-CEO of Flawless, alongside me. And I remember the reaction when he saw it, he was like, holy shit, if this is real, this is going to change everything. And he had a similar kind of scale of reaction. And what was great is Nick knew what to do with it. He didn't look at it like one film. He looked at it as a scale of serving everyone in a global way, in a scaled up way, which is a very different kind of mindset to approach the problem from, and how to get this into software product development. He'd been through all that before in various different journeys. And so literally within the course of 5 days, we shook hands and said, let's just do this together. Let's split it right down the middle. It's our baby. Let's build this up and actually do something with it.
So it's very cool. You've got this amazing interdisciplinary team now. Several years later, how do you describe what Flawless does? How does this tech work? Walk us through the process.
Basically, how this is working is it's allowing for perfectly lip-synced cinematic versions of films in every language. And it does that by understanding the kind of personal nuances of performing actor's face, and also understanding the nuances of a recording actor's dialogue of a foreign language dialogue, let's say, of a track, and it's able to map the mouth movements so that they are genuine to that person, but they are making the performance sounds of the new dialogue. So it syncs those things up and becomes a very kind of authentic version of a movie. And we've built this out as software principally that plugs into major localization houses. And really we've built the tools for the localization folks, for the actors and for the artists that are here. And really what it opens out is a much better way to not compromise on the vision. And like your story, their language is kind of the tagline, I'd say, for TrueSync, in that it's creating an authentic version. And it's really, it's as if the actors performed in that language on set. It's that authentic. So it kind of, it's just as immersive as the original is ultimately the output of that.
So does your tool need to train on the actor's performance in that particular movie, or is it looking at other data sets?
To be able to deliver in the film industry or any kind of professional industry as a transactional commercial product, you have to be able to have a very clear understanding of the rights of what's created or what's modified. And especially in the film industry, where the film industry is built in an economy of rights, and you have to be able to essentially grant rights to a studio or to whoever it is so that they can then take it and it can be distributed. So what that comes back to really is part of clean data strategy. It ties into technology somewhat as well, in that with TrueSync, for example, it's looking at the finished film. So the finished film from start to end. What it's essentially doing is analyzing, using a lot of deep learning processes, it's analyzing and labeling that film. Simplest way to understand it, it's almost like doing a light stage scan of the actors, but just by looking at the film itself. So it has this really deep, intricate understanding of the actors, how they've performed, how they're saying certain words, how they've performed in the scene. And it's able to take that. And then when you run new dialogue through there, it's essentially kind of interjecting and mapping that and using that to map. But it's using what's the new mouth movements, let's call it, are all based on the mouth moves of the actor in the film itself. And then underneath it all, you have elements of generative manipulation, let's call it, that all needs to be trained on clean data. That's kind of all been curated, shot, or licensed very specifically for, say, adjusting mouth movements. So we don't combine. For example, we don't kind of go back and, let's say it's a film with Robert De Niro, we don't go back and find other files of Robert De Niro. Because again, that would be breaking copyright. Unless we had the explicit right to do that, that would be a non-scalable, kind of very breakable way. But we do have what we call narrow models, which are very deep, very focused on very particular things. So lip synchronicity is a great one to kind of highlight, I'd say, where we have, let's say, I think we have over 50 million cinematic level AV frames that have trained, that we've shot for purpose, that we've done actually shot in-house as a production house, and really just kind of made this the right way, where we've got we've got clean data underpinnings to every stage of the process, so that you're able to say, okay, well, here's the film, that's where the kind of copyright layer, and then the modification came from here, and that's the underpinnings of that training data set. And that way you're able to use it and you're able to sell it. Like, a big problem with practically all of the AI tools out there at the moment is there is no way to really transact with that, because it's all really from stolen scraped data. When you ask, hey, what's the provenance of this? Well, yeah, it really is. It's really bad. And I think that, there is a huge difference between a research data set and a commercial product, right? And what's happened is a lot of folks who've worked in the research area, which can be tremendous, exciting research, don't get me wrong, but working in the research area and then put out products that are based on the research data sets, that there's no right to do that. And that's what you're kind of seeing, the reckoning of that, I'd say right now, is that's what's happened. So I know it's taken us many years to kind of do this right. It's taken us really a long time to build this up from the roots up, to do this in a clean way. And that's why we kind of built the artistic rights treasury, really, is that's the mechanism that allows that to happen.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So your tech has basically two pieces. One is where you can analyze the actor's performance in a movie and sort of like encapsulate that, as let's just call it a model. And then you've got another data set that lets you, kind of pull on figuring out how to reanimate that performance, where you do own all the rights for. And with those things combined, you get this superpower. But it's not just dubbing, right? You've got this tool that lets you transfer the performance in one shot of an actor to a different shot. How does that help filmmakers? Because this idea of transferring performances versus creating it from scratch seems very powerful.
Yeah, it's absolutely. It's kind of elemental editing, right? You're able to perfect the performance. You're able to edit things in a way that you weren't able to edit them before. And it's really about, for me, it's the most exciting part of this, right? Because it changes the way you shoot a movie. Like when you shoot a film, or when I'm shooting, a lot of time is spent in repetition, for example, right? Where you will shoot a scene and then you'll throw the camera to different folks, and part of the difficulty of doing a film is that once you've kind of done a performance well, you're repeating it and trying to keep the continuity of that. And it becomes a very kind of like mechanical, difficult process that's not terribly creative for the folks on set. And as we kind of cover scenes, we've got all this wastage of this repetitive nature. Being able now to take a performance and say, all right, nailed that is exactly the performance we all want. We love it. and we're able to copy and paste that into a different shot or sometimes even a different scene, it really frees up that creative process. And knowing that ability to be able to do that changes the way you shoot. And it also offers a number of things in the post-production phase of movies and television in particular, where you don't realize kind of what you have until you see the finished outcome. And that's when you might say, oh, we need to change that line. And typically you can only do that by going back to set and reshooting. But being able to do it, whether it's just having the actor say the line and then kind of see it or take it from another place, it's this new era of kind of agile filmmaking, I'd say. And there's also a lot of other things kind of coming down the pipe that feed into that as well. And I think that go beyond the performance. And I think we've just had a very kind of clear focus on the fundamental things that can make a real difference as tools for artists and filmmakers. And that's where it's coming from. So it gets me excited at the possibilities, and it just frees you out to do, basically to flawlessly perfect your film.
That's such an amazing tool in the toolkit for creatives.
Support for the show comes from LinkedIn. Where are my B2B marketers out there? If you are a B2B marketer, you know how noisy the ad space can be, which means if your message isn't targeted to a specific audience and the right audience that you're looking for, it can just easily disappear into the noise. But with LinkedIn ads, you can precisely reach the pros who are more likely to find your ad relevant. LinkedIn has targeting capabilities so that you can reach the folks you're looking for by job title, industry, company, and more filters. So you can stand out with LinkedIn ads and start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. LinkedIn ads will let you build the right relationships, drive results, and reach your customers in an environment where a lot of your customers are hanging out, because you will have direct access to and network with decision makers, 1 billion members, 130 million decision makers, and 10 million C-level executives. You can start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We will even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/TEDaudio to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/TEDaudio. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Bada, bada boom, sold.
Huh?
Just sold my car on Carvana. Dropping it off and getting paid today.
Already?
What, you still haven't sold yours? You told me about it months ago. Is the offer good?
Oh, the offer's great.
Don't have another car yet?
I could trade it in for this car I love.
Come on, what are we waiting for?
You're right.
Let's go.
Whether you're looking to sell your car right now or just whenever feels right, go to Carvana.com and sell your car the convenient way. Terms and conditions apply.
Have you done like actual AV tests of taking the old way of dubbing something and this new way of vubbing something?
They are being done now. So there's a bunch going on right now with different studios that we're working with. But we've done testing, of course, like when we've seen audience reactions and audience tests. Part of the difficulty on this is to get a true read across it all. You can only see one thing once is part of your problem. But I think in terms of the advancement over subbing and dubbing, it's definitely in the multiplier of a completely different level of experience. As these films come out, there's films coming out at the end of this year, there's going to be things on platform at the end of this year, and I think we're going to start seeing that. And whether people want to say up front that what you're about to experience has had this done, it actually kind of might dent the experience. Like almost a blind experience is probably the true one that you'd want. So I think how distributors and how folks want to introduce these things. There's a lot of kind of commercials as well that, we've done things where it's gone out in like 35 different languages, for example, around the world. And I'm sure to everyone who watches it just will think it's a local language commercial, right? But measuring like from an art form, it's difficult to truly measure because you can't watch something twice once if you don't. It's a little bit difficult.
Totally, yeah. How do you make them forget exactly what they saw and then watch it again?
Yeah.
So it feels really exciting that you've got this technology, and as it keeps getting democratized, right, it feels like there's like almost silos of content that are sitting around that are going to find a whole new audience. I mean, I can just only imagine how much latent value is sitting in catalogs around the globe.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also, what's going to be super interesting, I think, is it's going to expose so much talent from everywhere. You're going to have incredible actors, for example, who will be able to be exposed to a world of audience, and to be extreme, you've got like 8 billion people on the planet. And rather than having a few 100,000 per your language, you can really kind of be exposed to a lot more people. And that in turn, it kind of changes some of the dynamics of how films are put together and who stars in them and opportunities for people. I think the big change we're about to see is going from a local stage to a global stage, where filmmakers start thinking about making films for a global audience. The knock-on effect is actually quite beautiful, because the old me making a movie would be considering, I'd be writing a movie and directing a movie with a consideration primarily with my own language and culture. I wouldn't be thinking too much about how a choice I make is interpreted, read, or impactful in various different ways in different cultures. Now, making a film that can travel globally and can, let's say, even have a global cast that all speak different languages but are together in a film. But making a film for a global audience, you then start really considering other cultures, and you start like walking in the shoes of other people by experiencing their movies. And I think one of the big problems we've got in the world is if we don't understand someone, we polarize, right? I think over the next few years, as we break down that language barrier completely and we're really able to immerse and enjoy global cinema, we'll start looking at each other differently and start kind of appreciating the human component that lies at the heart of all of these stories, which is kind of what everyone's been after, I think.
Oh yes, the hero with 1,000 faces, as it's said.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. This technology is a bridge builder. You've talked about all the positives, right? Like it really does make the world feel smaller and let you sort of appreciate content the way it was meant to be. But there's a dark side to all of this too, and obviously I have to ask you about that. I mean, AI has been seen as a job eliminator in almost every industry, right? And so, how do you think about these concerns of potential job displacement in the dubbing industry due to the rise of this AI technology?
When I started this journey, I'd say we had two existential threats to the film industry. We had the lack of audience reach and the sheer kind of cost of production and the time it took to make production. There is a third existential threat that's been introduced, which is AI. The biggest theft that's ever occurred is occurring right now with AI stealing artistic works and actually hurting the artistic community. So I think there's a kind of broad sense there that it's a huge thing. And I think that how you go about that and what you do about that is really has been fundamental to us with Flawless, because if you're destroying the very industry that you love and you're trying to build, it's a pointless endeavor. You've kind of failed your mission at step one. So that's really why understanding the value of artistic rights has been a big part of everything that we've built out. It's arguably the biggest thing. An understanding that the value is really laying with the artistic community. The actual value is in the creatives that bring this stuff together. There are these enormously talented pools, whether it's Korean, Indian, talented filmmakers that are at the level of Hollywood, but the stories just don't get the chance to travel. We'd rather, particularly in English-speaking territories, typically remake things. You'll have an incredible film like The Guilty, for example, right? Great movie, a very kind of tight thriller, incredible film that instead of people really enjoying that or being able to enjoy it in the way that they do, there's a $30-40 million remake of that. And if it doesn't have much value, you don't get much money or time to do it. So you have a lot of these localization houses are having to rush through everything, which then further kind of reduces the quality.
So let's talk a little bit about sort of the art and the labor aspect of all of this, right? You're building tools with creatives at the center, which really comes through very clearly in your messaging and also all the work that you've done. I want to talk about some of the challenges I'm sure you face, right? Especially you set up the perfect firsthand experience you had with the botched translation job. For many, a significant concern regarding dubbing is sort of like the essence or meaning of what is being said is lost in translation. What are some of the challenges in maintaining that quality and accuracy of dubbing across so many different languages and like kind of capturing those cultural nuances?
I think it's you're absolutely right. It's a very there is a lot of nuance that when it comes down to it, it's obviously different cultures have different contexts, have different ways to express, and that obviously comes out and really, is vital for a story to kind of convey to an audience. I think the important kind of component we followed was the experts in this have worked in this field for a long time. And so it was very kind of key to make this technology to be additive to them and look at the whole localization process with a fresh take on, okay, how can we make this obviously more efficient, but really, like, how do we make it so we end up with something as authentic as the original? And that's always been the aim. But AI is a derivative process, right? It doesn't have a heart. It doesn't feel something. It can't come up with a new idea or a surprise. I think all of those things with art is derived from feeling and being and much more kind of elemental, real things. And if you look at all the kind of great works and great stories over the centuries, they've typically kind of gone to a place that is the human place, where kind of stories and ideas emerge and creativity comes from that place. So I think the change in our industry is actually going to be that even though it looked like creativity was the first thing that was being impacted when AI kind of rose to public visibility, even though it felt like the creatives were getting wiped out the first, I actually think that in the long term, that's going to be the most valuable asset, because that's the one thing AI can't replace. Whereas actually, like, non-creative processes are the ones that AI is actually really good at, right? The non-creative components are where I think you'll see a change. And especially like heavy laborsome non-creative work is where it's going to impact the most. From our perspective as a company, it's the reason why we've made tools for artists, right? So if you're making a tool that is impacting, let's say, dubbing actors' work, you make it for them and give them the benefit. And if you look at like AI influence on industry, the conversation what a lot of people grapple with is like, how do you transfer the benefit to the right people? And how does that work? And I think the framework of filmmaking strangely offers a similar framework that can benefit the artist. So if you're using, let's say, an artist for something or enabling something that hadn't happened before, they should be the one that's compensated. They should be the one that gets the benefit of that. And for the filmmaker, let's say you're getting it faster, you're getting it tweaked to the way that you're kind of directing to want it, but you should be making the tools for those folks. And really, given that their work is the underlying work that is powering those models, they should be the owners of it, right? So the big thing that everyone's trying to pull over our eyes at the moment is like, oh yeah, well, an AI company that looks very valuable, a lot of them look very valuable just because of all the stuff they've stolen that's hidden underneath it, spewing out kind of similar looking stuff. And really the value of those companies is laying in the underlying training data. And it's not really the algorithm.
Yeah, it's like, hey, you just distilled all human knowledge and creativity, but without the human knowledge and creativity, there would be nothing to distill.
Exactly. And if you're just scraping it, right, and if you're just scraping books or art or videos and just stealing it and then spitting it back out again, it's kind of like, well, that's just theft. You know, with copyright, for example, only humans should have copyright, right? Companies shouldn't have creative copyright. It should hold with a human, because that as long as it holds with a human, that allows us to kind of enter the industry in a way that grows the economy of the artistic industry rather than destroys it.
Viewing this as sort of like, you know, to your point, there's what's ethical isn't always legal and what's legal isn't always ethical. And just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think a great example of that I'd love you to talk about just briefly is, you know, AI voice synthesis. The ability to just generate voices has gotten really, really good. But it seems like y'all don't use it right now. You actually prefer to have an actual talent do it, because is it the feeling point that you brought up earlier?
Yeah, I think there's two reasons. I would say, yes, there are very great advancements in that area in audio, but a bit to the point earlier in terms of understanding kind of cultural context, language, performance, and emotion, and what you want to convey. There is tremendous nuance in the way someone can deliver something, and human beings, actors, let's say, right, dubbing actors, are such a level better than the very best stuff out there right now, for sure. But then the double point I would make is that the lift and benefit of any system that has taken a lot of, say, performances and generated a new performance out of it should be benefiting those very actors. So if an actor wants to use synthetic voices that have been created from their voice, they should be rewarded for that. Actually, a good example would be in Fall, a movie I made where we didn't use synthetic for this, but I'll use it as an example where we did a bunch of about 40 line changes, swear words to non-swear words, so R to PG-13 versions. Now the actors going into a recording booth and recording those words to try and match to the original audio and replace them and things. That's a lot of work. It's not the most interesting work, let's say, for them. And if they were given a choice where that could be synthetically done and they were rewarded and paid for the use of that, that's a great benefit to them, and that's a great benefit to the director, to the producer, to everyone else, right? It really helps everyone in that chain. But the important bit is they are compensated for it, and it's had their consent that they're happy that that performance is their performance. And it's incredibly simple, actually, when it comes down to it, isn't it? Like just rewarding the very people that are using it rather than saying, oh, that's mine. And I think that's the...
Totally. Fair use, hand wave.
Yeah, exactly. So but yeah, like I say, obviously the courts are grappling with this right now with a number of large AI models. I think it's coming out in the wash, the side of this that it needs to be at, and hopefully they'll continue to do that. And it's a really important piece of this whole new world we're living in.
So you've talked about authentic translation, and that's clearly what your company's doing. But going full circle back to SIGGRAPH, I'm also seeing your company's latest research is focused on creating 3D avatars, like these implicit representations. How far do you think we're from a world where we can have these fully generated performances, and maybe you have your Apple Vision Pro headset on and you're literally kind of directing the talent, if you will. And of course, if it's Robert DeNiro, he gets a massive cut of the performance there. How far are we from this sci-fi holodeck filmmaking feature?
That's a really interesting question. Yeah. I think I would look at it like, I don't think we're that far away, but I will also say, again, it depends how it's built, right? And it depends who it's for. If I'm in a holodeck and De Niro is also in a holodeck, and he's, and that's a way of kind of communicating or creating something. That's one thing, but I think it's about who kind of plugs into that new world. Honestly,
right now the approach you're taking is sort of this human plus machine approach, right? Mm-hmm. There's the best of both worlds, and I can't help but think, we were talking about rock solid data with rock solid provenance. I can't help but think you're essentially collecting, by process of doing human plus machine work, a ton of this label training data that could automate a bunch of these tasks. And I'm kind of curious, do you envision a future where more and more of these tasks get automated? Would you shift your focus to something else? Or is this a case of just because you can do it, you shouldn't?
I think it's always a balance of asking that question. Should you? If the benefit is the folks who are using it, if the benefit is the artists that are using it, then that I think is good for everyone. I think if the benefit ends up falling to kind of others, then that's where it's in question. If you're offering, say, tools for actors, that should be in the hands of actors, and that's who should be benefiting from that gain. I think that's the way to make the system flourish. You do not want a world, I certainly don't want a world where the creatives are kind of washed out of a process. It should be enabling to the creatives, and we should be creating more.
Well, I couldn't have said it any better myself. Scott, thanks for being here. In the rapidly evolving landscape of AI and creativity, we're seeing a refreshing approach emerge. Instead of positioning AI as a replacement for human talent, some visionaries like Scott Mann are developing tools that keep creatives at the center of the process. And this isn't necessarily the most lucrative decision, but one that feels right for the art and science of filmmaking. One where we value collaboration over disruption, working with existing industries rather than trying to replace them. One with ethical considerations, prioritizing consent and fair compensation for creatives, baking that into the business model from the start. And finally, one where we create empowering tools, developing AI that turns creative visions into reality, from facial avatars to potentially full-body renderings. This isn't about AI versus humans, but AI and humans, collaborating to push storytelling boundaries together. To me, the future of creativity is exciting. As these tools develop, we could be on the brink of a storytelling renaissance, limited only by our imagination. The TED AI Show is a part of the TED Audio Collective and is produced by TED with Cosmic Standard. Our producers are Ben Montoya and Alex Higgins. Our editors are Ban Cheng and Alejandra Salazar. Our showrunner is Ivana Tucker, and our engineer is Asia Pilar Simpson. Our technical director is Jacob Winnick, and our executive producer is Eliza Smith. Our researcher and fact-checker is Christian Aparta, and I'm your host, Bilawal Sidhu. See y'all in the next one.